In March of 1968, a single morning in Vietnam exposed a truth the world was never supposed to confront. What followed was not a battlefield error or a moment of chaos. It was a decision. From 1965 to 1973, the United States fought a brutal war against North Vietnam and its communist allies, a conflict with no clear front lines and no obvious enemy. Soldiers were sent into villages where civilians and combatants were often indistinguishable, and the cost of that confusion would be paid by the innocent. The Vietnam War still divides opinion. Some defend it as a necessary stand against communism, while others condemn it as a tragic overreach driven by Cold War fear. But no debate can erase one fact. Millions died, and civilians bore the greatest burden. Among all the suffering, one village would come to symbolize the true human cost of the war. On March 16, 1968, more than 500 unarmed civilians, women, children, infants, and elderly farmers, were killed in a matter of hours. History would remember this place as My Lai. By early 1968, the war itself was unraveling. The Tet Offensive had shattered American confidence and exposed how far official claims were from reality. Military leaders needed proof of progress, and they needed it quickly. That pressure narrowed onto a single target. In Quang Ngai Province lay a cluster of hamlets known as Sun Mai, labeled by U.S. forces as My Lai. Intelligence reports claimed enemy fighters were embedded there, and maps marked the area as sympathetic to the Viet Cong. What those reports failed to grasp was devastatingly simple. There were no enemy forces waiting. Task Force Barker was assembled for the mission, with Charlie Company at its core. The unit was commanded by Captain Ernest Medina, with Lieutenant William Calley serving under him. Charlie Company had been in Vietnam for months. They had seen little direct combat, yet mines and hidden traps had already killed many of their friends. Fear hardened into frustration, and frustration into resentment. On the night of March 15th, the company gathered to mourn a sergeant killed the day before. Grief turned into rage, and revenge felt justified. Orders were given for a dawn assault. Soldiers were told civilians would leave early for the market, and the implication was left hanging in the air. Anyone still there would not be treated as innocent. At 7:24 a.m., the operation began. Artillery shells ripped into the countryside, and helicopters soon descended on My Lai. The troops met no resistance. There were no ambushes, no gunfire, no enemy fighters, only villagers who were confused, terrified, and unarmed. Families were rounded up and pushed into open areas, many believing they were about to be questioned. Then, without warning, the violence began. A single act shattered what little restraint remained. Gunfire erupted. Soldiers shot indiscriminately, threw grenades into shelters filled with people, and set homes ablaze. Mothers tried to shield their children with their bodies, but it made no difference. Infants were killed moments after their parents. Lieutenant Calley gathered dozens of civilians near an irrigation ditch and ordered them executed. He fired into the crowd himself until no one moved. Similar killings unfolded across nearby hamlets. Army photographer Ronald Haberle captured images of terrified villagers and piles of bodies, including the moment a wounded child was shot at close range. The massacre lasted for hours. Some soldiers refused to take part, but almost none tried to stop it. The killing only slowed when a helicopter crew, led by Hugh Thompson Jr., intervened. They placed their aircraft between civilians and American troops, evacuating as many villagers as they could, and even pulling a living child from a ditch of corpses. About a dozen lives were saved, hundreds were not. The crime was reported, then buried, until journalists exposed the truth. Only one man was convicted, and even his sentence was reduced. My Lai remains a scar on history, a reminder that what was revealed may be only a fraction of what was never brought to light.